Hey everybody, Darth Brianboy here. So what the hell is making me revisit this fucking topic that I've talked about so many times throughout the years I've been doing this? Probably, 13 years of being on YouTube? What is causing me to dive into one of my favorite topics? The theatrical cuts of Star Wars, the importance of them, how the special editions fuck that up, and how the fandom, post the Disney era, post the sequel trilogy, have either stopped giving a shit about this or just pretend it's not a big fucking deal. Admittedly, compared to what's going on in the world, 3 films not being released in 4K or 1080p isn't a big deal, admittedly, compared to what's going on right now. But for nerds like you and me, they should be a big deal. Especially if you give a fuck about the concept of film preservation. And admittedly, what got me on this tangent was I was watching a little bit of a Star Wars Theory live stream. He was playing a game. And I thought, okay, I've been wanting to ask him this fucking question for a long time. I think I might have even asked him a year or two ago. But I don't remember if I recorded or even got the answer. So I give him a $5 super chat. And I ask him 2 questions. Have you heard of Army's Despecialized Editions? Never heard of them. And also, what do you think of the George Lucas changes? So this is the clip I recorded. If it's not the same resolution or frame rate, I'm sorry. I'm not used to screen recording on my phone, but here's the clip as it is.
I was wondering what your thoughts on
Is there a reason we're just standing
Army's Despecialized Editions are, and what are your thoughts on changes to George made to the OT? What's Harmy's Despecialized Editions?
Oh.
The changes George made to the OT, I mean, he has every right to make changes to his movies.
Federation droids here.
Admittedly, to be fair to him, this wasn't like a one-on-one debate or a conversation between the two of us. This was just a random $5 super chat I gave the man, and therefore I couldn't pry as much as I would have liked without wasting more money that I don't need to waste right now, especially on stupid shit. But if you notice right there, he said, yeah, he can make whatever changes he wants, with the argument of the importance regarding the theatrical cuts of 4, 5, and 6 was never and is never about the changes themselves. The changes themselves, in my opinion, only matter because we don't have this shit officially. Really. Not in a comparable way, okay? So, the cuts I grew up with of 4, 5, and 6, I'm using these for visual aid, okay? These are video CDs. This is not how I viewed the movies back in the day, okay? I have the tapes still, but they're in a bin, and I'm not really in any condition to lift anything super heavy or really go through my videotapes for the sake of a 5 or 6 second thing in the video. So, these are the 97 cuts. These are basically the closest thing I could get to showing how I would have watched them in theory. So, this is a 2000s release of the 97 cuts. The 97 cuts are the versions of 4, 5, and 6 I grew up with. And in 2007 or 6, I remember this vividly. I remember watching Return of the Jedi, I think on Comcast On Demand back in the day, at my cousin's house. And at the end of it, I remember seeing Hayden Christensen replace Sebastian Shaw. Now, when I was a kid who had just seen Revenge of the Sith recently, and that was like his favorite movie of all time, I was 9 years old, seeing the guy playing Anakin returning for, a cameo in 4, 5, and 6, I thought, oh, that's cool. Not realizing at the time that this was a sign that this was going to be something permanent in future releases. So the Blu-ray comes out. George Lucas makes several bastardized changes to 4, 5, and 6. I have the Blu-ray set. So I get the Blu-rays in 2012, right? I first saw that this some of these changes were leaked in August of 2011. I remember this vividly. I was at a campground and I was watching it on my phone. I think it was a Samsung Galaxy S1. And I hear something that just sounds and looks fake. So when I get the actual Blu-rays and I pop in Return of the Jedi on my PS3 that I'd gotten to play Blu-rays, and to my horror, Darth Vader does say, "No, no," as he throws the fucking Emperor down the Death Star shaft to kill him. I was just baffled why the fuck he would do this. I know the reasoning. You don't have to write in the comments George Lucas's reasoning for why he made this dumbass change. I know the reason he made this dumbass change. That doesn't distract or change the fact this was a stupid fucking change. So the only way to watch Star Wars, okay, officially without this dumbass change, okay, because if you stream it, that change is there. If you're showing Star Wars to your kids or your cousins or nieces or nephews who are little for the first time and you don't have them on physical media, the version you're going to go to is the 2020 cut, which also has that dumbass change and several other dumbass changes that Lucas made to this shit back in 2011. The only way to watch them is you track down the 04 DVDs, which are kind of harder to find now. They were released almost 20 years ago, so you got that. Alright, if you want to be a fucking weirdo, you get the video CD, except these are rare and expensive and are horrible quality. So if you have a VCR, like I do, you'll watch it that way. Or, if you got lucky like I did, you get the Harmy Despecialized editions, which are the closest thing we're ever going to get to a good quality version of 4, 5, and 6. I'm aware Harmy is still working on this shit. You know, he's always fine-tuning this trilogy and this restoration with new footage, better shit from archives, or just using the official releases to make a better version, because that's just what Harmy does. But I was lucky enough to buy these bootlegs. These aren't the kids that came in, by the way. Back in 2017, I got a lot of shit for it. But considering where the fandom has gone, and in my opinion, over-romanticizing George Lucas, and acting like he's a saint and holier than thou, and like, oh, he's the creator, therefore he can do no wrong with his movie. If you're a true fan, the Star Wars special edition changes don't matter. That's a bad argument, that's a disingenuous argument, and that's a detestable argument to make. I am a film buff. I might consider myself a film historian on an amateur level. When I hear these arguments, I get offended. I get angry. The original Star Wars trilogy is one of the most important trilogies of all time. The American Film Institute, or the Library of Congress actually, back in the 70s or 80s requested that the original Star Wars, okay, the original version, be given to the government for the sake of archival purposes, because the state realized that it was one of the most important films came out of this country. Lucas refuses to do that and gives them a 97 cut. They're like, we can't accept this. A film has to be given to us in its original version as it was shown in the theaters when it came out. That's a reasonable and fair thing to request. Considering this is what? What is this? An archival fucking organization. When you have archives, you want the original version preserved. Otherwise, what the fuck's the point? The special editions, okay? This cut right here is not the version that got nominated for several Oscars, okay? This version is not the version that got nominated for several Oscars, alright? So if I flip to A New Hope, right? Okay? If I flip to here, not the version that was nominated for Best Picture, okay? Not the version that was nominated, okay? What was? This cut. right here, the second disc right here, or this was the version that was nominated. Except for the fact this isn't the version that was nominated. This is a reconstruction of the theatrical versions. Something that the fandom rightfully tried to reconstruct for future generations. In fact, it's kind of funny. Harmy's origins when it comes to why he became so obsessed with the theatrical cuts was because he found out the cut of Empire Strikes Back he was watching wasn't the theatrical version. It was a changed version. And there's also something regarding Czech Republic and the Soviet Union, and Harmy explains it better than I can. But what's the main argument I'm making here? I think, frankly, if you really are a fan of Star Wars, it's not about, oh, I love all the lore, or I'm obsessed with the lore, or I love all the movies. I think how you measure a true fan is when you look at all the aspects of Star Wars. You go, okay, I like some shit in Legends, I like some shit in canon, but I think one thing that should be like a definitive unifying point that we all should have is that the theatrical cuts need to be preserved for future generations. So I thought it was important to not just go after George Lucas as viciously as I've done. Not just go after him, because I also have a huge gripe with Disney. Now, at the time of these releases, okay, pre-COVID, all that shit, you know, we've all gone through a pandemic and shit like that. So, in 2020, well, in 2019, we got the streaming versions of 4, 5, and 6 and the rest of the Star Wars movies on Disney Plus. Now, at the time, because I'm thinking, oh my god, Star Wars is coming to 4K. You know, we're gonna get the theatrical cuts of these fucking movies. We're gonna get them. Guess what? We don't fucking get the theatrical cuts. We get, I mean, I've seen bits and pieces of this. It looks stunning. It looks beautiful. I hate how good it looks. It looks better than the despecialized edition, which in terms of resolution only goes up to 720p. So, when Disney, fucking Disney, okay, one of the most infamous companies for, I guess, changing their movies, but also giving their animated catalogs these stunning remasters, you would think that such a culturally significant thing like Star Wars would be released in its original form in some way. Just for the sake of, hey, making a few more dollars. Maybe making the ultra deluxe version of the Skywalker saga. So they've done that, and they've done several releases of that. They've done these individual trilogy packs. No theatrical cuts to be seen at sight. And unlike with Lucas, where I can understand it was a filmmaker who was ashamed of his own masterpieces. Because that's what the original trilogy is. It's a fucking masterpiece of a trilogy. And when you have an artist ashamed of their work, you see it reflected in how that work is distributed. So that's why we haven't gotten a good quality version of 4, 5, and 6. And of course, because the fandom has changed in age demographic, the fandom that was going, what the fuck, George? Yo, we want the theatrical cuts. What are you fucking around for? He doesn't crack under the pressure. He kind of gives you the middle finger and goes, yeah, you want your theatrical cut? Here's your theatrical cuts. Here's some fucking Laserdisc transfers from 93. Shut the fuck up and eat that, why don't you? Okay, that was George Lucas. That was his response. Now, when I had a CRT TV, those versions were fine. I didn't give a shit because, you know, I got those elongated black bars, but when I'm watching on a 4K or HD TV, that shit doesn't satisfy or suffice anymore, especially because of the goddamn subtitle. Thank you, Harmy. Because when I'm watching the despecialized, it feels like I'm watching the versions as they were meant to be seen. Whenever I do a Star Wars marathon, I always watch the despecialized editions. They're the better versions of Star Wars. They got better pacing. They feel like movies that were made in the 70s and 80s. That's how they were meant to be shown. That's how they were meant to be seen. That's how they should have been preserved for all of time. But when Disney basically is like, oh, we're going to do a new remaster, I'm like, okay, cool. But the remaster is just a better looking version of the shit we've already received, making it seemingly impossible that a theatrical cut will ever be released. Now, not to get political, but I am someone who's very left-wing. So when I heard that Disney was buying Fox, I went, well, that's fucked because more monopolies are bad. But if the one thing I was hoping for would happen, it was this. Disney couldn't release the original trilogy as Disney releases because Fox owned the distribution rights. And in turn, they couldn't release the theatrical cut because Fox owned the distribution rights. So I'm thinking, when Disney buys Fox, they'll get the distribution rights, no problem. And then they can release the theatrical cuts officially, which is what I was really hoping for. They didn't. So, this is bullshit. It's always been bullshit. If you give a damn about film preservation as I do, you know the history of the silent era of films. You know how few of them were preserved. How it's a fucking miracle that we got movies like Metropolis, Nosferatu, and Cabinet of Dr. Caligari, you know, on Blu-ray or on any type of watchable media. You know, Metropolis is a fucking miracle. Because that thing, the completed version of that was said to be lost to time. And ironically, like with the specialized editions, that had to be reconstructed to get to its original glory. It was the closest thing you could get to a complete version of Metropolis. There's a one scene they couldn't find that they had to fill in through text. Can you imagine if that happened with Star Wars? It's a miracle that fans came together. Fans who really love this fucking saga said, we're not satisfied with the way George Lucas is treating his original versions. We're going to try to recreate it ourselves because fuck it. It's all we can do. And they did. They succeeded. I own them. I have them. I have them on my computer. I have them on Blu-ray. In theory, I could put them on my PS3, or when I get a PS5, I could put it on there. And they will be preserved forever. I could upload them to my Google Drive and preserve them forever if I wanted to. However, it still pains me that we live in a world where these three important films will never be shown in their theatrical versions officially. It's fucked. And it makes me upset. And it saddens me as a fan of this saga. To end this video, I'll give you one thing I said a long time ago that I think I can better articulate now. I respect Ridley Scott a lot more than George Lucas when it comes to preserving his films. Now, admittedly, it is getting a little harder to find the theatrical cut of Blade Runner, the international cut of Blade Runner, and the director's cut of Blade Runner, which wasn't really a director's cut. But you can still find that a little easier than you can the theatrical cuts of Star Wars. Ridley Scott, in several of these introductory clips for Blade Runner and for Alien, has said, hey, I didn't like the theatrical cut, I've made some changes, but if you're a fan of the theatrical cuts, it's not my right to take that away from you as the artist. That belongs to the people now. You know, my art belongs to you essentially. The viewing experience of it. So he essentially goes, please compare my final cut to the other cuts of Blade Runner that exist and decide which one you think is better. Did the same damn thing with Alien. I have a DVD set that contains 2 cuts of Alien on it. In fact, this Alien set contains 2 cuts of every Alien movie, except Prometheus and Covenant, because this set was from 2003. I think It's also on Blu-ray, but I like this DVD set, so fuck it. But because Ridley Scott did that, you know, you just gotta give him credit where credit's due. Same thing to James Cameron. James Cameron made his definitive version of Terminator 2, but you can still find a theatrical cut of Terminator 2 on various formats. Same thing for the first Avatar movie. You can find several cuts of Avatar. 3 cuts. I've got the 3-disc collector's edition down here. So what baffles and what makes me upset is if you've got 2 directors from George Lucas's generation who are humble enough to go, you know what, the theatrical cut isn't my vision, but if you like it, here it is. Same thing with Steven Spielberg. Steven Spielberg did a bastardized version of E.T. back in 2002. People were pissed off about it. So what happened? Well, ironically, the special edition of E.T. became hard to find because all you can find now is a theatrical cut on Blu-ray and 4K. And that's a pretty fucking important film. So, I'm still saddened and baffled that at the time when Lucas had full control of Star Wars, why he didn't... I really hate to say this, because it feels like I'm insulting the brilliant man, but I'm going to say it. Why didn't he have that same courage that Spielberg, Scott, and Cameron had to go, hey, I got my definitive version right here. But if you don't like it, here's a theatrical cut. Judge it for yourself. Make your own choice of which one you prefer to watch. And George Lucas robbed the fandom of that choice. He did. He robbed such a nuanced discussion about film preservation, about an artist having the ability to change their films on a whim, you know, and seeing, you know, is the director's cut of the film better or is the theatrical release better? He robbed arguments and discussions away from us. We can't have these arguments. Not really. There's no real official way to watch Star Wars as it was shown in the 70s and 80s. The fans had to fucking try to save it. You know how fucked that is? When you really think about it? What happens when George Lucas dies? That's my question. What happens when he dies? Will we then have the theatrical cuts? Because if that's the case, that's horrible. I genuinely hope that we somehow get the theatrical cuts of 4, 5, and 6 in some form. I know it's a long shot at this point, considering that this is most likely the last time that these 3 films will get a home video release. Disney doesn't care about physical media anymore. Disney, in fact, is not going to sell any physical releases of their movies to Australia. So physical media is a dying fucking breed. It's becoming more niche. You know, you look at all these major big box stores phasing it out and getting rid of it. And it makes a hope of seeing the unaltered versions of 4, 5, and 6 officially like a pipe dream. It's like something you'll never see. And that's depressing. With that in mind, live long and prosper. Thank you for watching my long ass video. And consider giving the video a like, subscribing to the channel, and sharing this video on various platforms. Thank you for your time.